So my name is Bianca Hollis. I'm lead user experience designer at BBC Worldwide, where I've been working for about 6 years now. I'm here today to tell you about my master's project or dissertation, which is about the way that I designed, implemented and evaluated a new method to integrate creativity techniques into Agile. I should say I've just finished the master's course in human-centered systems here at City University. So my new method builds on the work of Maiden et al., who for the last 10 years have been integrating creativity techniques into water software development life cycles. And now I'm kind of taking that idea into the Agile space, which presents with it new challenges. And really the general idea is that by integrating creative thinking into Agile, you're going to generate more novel requirements, which are a precursor to more innovative solutions. So just to run through, this is the agenda. So I'm going to start by talking about Agile innovation and touching on in what ways Agile is actually geared up towards innovation. And then talk about creativity techniques, briefly touch on those, what are they, how would you use them, and then integrating creativity into the Agile project, and that's where I actually, as part of my master's project, applied the new method to real live projects at BBC Worldwide. I'll tell you about 2 projects there. Then the final results of the study, the key points, and then at the end we'll have time for Q&A. So, Agile. Agile geared towards innovation. Agile is really popular now, and it's seen a substantial growth in the last decade. It's an umbrella term for iterative software development methods. Really one of the key benefits of Agile, and one of the reasons why it was born out of an alternative to the waterfall method, which was seen very cumbersome, is the fact that you get quick and tangible results. So very quickly you get to see a partially complete system, rather than a partially complete system, which means that at any point the business or the stakeholders, customers, can decide to literally cut and run. They can basically put the system live or out there into the commercial space whenever they feel the timing is right, and that really gives them a competitive advantage. Another thing is that it's built around a team of motivated individuals, which we know is actually good for creativity. And with that we get good communication. It's about delivery teams working very closely with the customer, and also about kind of parallel activities happening parallel across different disciplines. It's also one of Agile's mantras is inspect and adapt. So to continuously improve, to learn from your mistakes, to modify as you go along. It's lightweight, so there's no big cumbersome heavy requirements documentation. It delivers in small light iterations of 14 to 30-day sprints, and it really just focuses on the core essentials of the system, and there's no real kind of waste. It's also flexible, so another way it's geared towards innovation is it allows the project team and the stakeholders to really steer the project as they go along in whichever direction they feel right, depending on the changing business priorities or the changing market, or even as their understanding of the system evolves. And finally, and I think this is really key, Agile is about delivering value. So you're working closely with the customer and you're really focusing on what matters to them. The requirements process means that requirements are written on A5 cards, and these are, when they're actually in development, usually placed up onto a Kanban board. And everything that makes it everything that's a requirement makes it into the backlog. And this is constantly reprioritised by the customer according to what matters to them the most, where the value is. And the ones that are at the top will be taken off and put into the next sprint. So the customer decides whether the value actually justifies the effort and the budget. And these are all the reasons why Jim Highsmith, amongst lots of other people, believe that Agile is really geared towards innovation. But I then say that, is this sometimes or often at the expense of more creative solutions? So if you think about lean principles and about the elimination of waste and the reduction of complexity, if you think about Kent Beck talking about during requirements gathering and user story writing, thinking about just think of the simplest solution, think of the simplest thing first and go with it. And Mike Cohn in User Story Applied talks about designing an online bookstore and likens it to the fact that they've seen another online bookstore, therefore let's just go with that, let's copy that, and away we go. So too often it's the simplest and most obvious ideas, and Isaacson, who I'll talk about later, actually calls this the normal response zone. So these are kind of our most obvious, simplest solutions. So also James Robertson in 2002 talked about there are 3 different types of requirements during your requirements eliciting or gathering process. So first of all, there's the most obvious ideas. So the things that you say to a customer, what do you want? And they'll say, okay, I want this, that, and the other. The next, your second, will be tacit requirements. So those that actually, that are kind of deeply embedded, or that the customer doesn't realise that they need to tell you. And those are where your user-centred design, or your requirements gathering and your analysis will actually help you uncover those, perhaps through observation or other UCD techniques. So that's your tacit requirements. But then there's a third type of requirements, according to Robertson, and these are the undreamt of requirements. And this is where creativity techniques come in. So if we think that innovation is the implementation of a creative idea, and if, as Sternberg says, that creativity is the ability to produce work that is both novel, that's i.e. Original and unexpected, and useful, which is appropriate, then surely Agile, to be innovative, needs to have creativity explicitly embedded within it. So just before I move on, I will make one point that's just on the subject of simplicity. So obviously I'm not saying that simplicity is a bad thing, because it is often a very good thing. In that, if you look at Alan Cooper, the sort of father of user-centered design, will often talk about simple solutions, make it simple and make it easy for the user. And obviously we have things like UI patterns, development patterns, best practices, usability practices. But the key really is about knowing when to use creativity, when is it appropriate. And if you look at Apple and Google and how successful they are with their kind of simple products, yet actually behind the scenes there's something quite complex and sophisticated going on. So really what I'm going to show you is how to know when to use creativity in Agile. So what is creativity then? So according to Bowden, there are 3 different types of creativity. So you've got exploratory creativity, where you would start with a particular idea or concept, and then you would go off and explore different avenues and kind of go on a journey, an unexpected journey, unplanned journey, and see where it leads you. You then got combinational creativity, which is where you take 2 completely random, completely disparate ideas that you never would have thought of putting together, and put them together and see what you get, and get something that you never would have thought of before. And thirdly is transformational creativity, which is almost the most powerful type of creativity. And this is where you really just completely change the space. So this could be complete new invention. So perhaps when the first touch touchscreen phones came out, for example. There are hundreds of creativity techniques, and if you go on Amazon or if you go on the internet, I find there's hundreds and hundreds on there, and lots of books on Amazon. These are just a few of the techniques, and all of these kind of cover those three different areas, so the exploratory, combinational and transformational different techniques. And in the projects, when I talk about those, I talk about particular techniques that I use. So going back to Maiden et al., so they basically integrated creativity into the waterfall life cycle in a way, and they developed what they called the Rescue Workshop, which is a 2-day workshop which focuses on the sort of key elements of creative thinking. So your preparation, you need a kind of starting point, you need some inspiration. Then you need a period of incubation time to kind of think over what you've taken in and perhaps ideas you've had. And then during that kind of moment of relaxation and incubation, you'll then have your kind of bright spark idea, moment of illumination, and then kind of verification, as in you kind of suss out, is it really a good idea? How might we use that? So this is a 2-day workshop that they designed, but 2 days really in Agile terms to have the resources and the budget, it's not really possible, or certainly not from my experience. So in this project, I was looking to really take this to the Agile space and design a lightweight solution that could cope with the constraints and the pressures of Agile and having to constantly deliver through those short iterations. So if we look at the Agile system development lifecycle, this is taken from Scott Ambler. So quickly run through the kind of process. So we've got perhaps an initial funding for a project, and we might do some model storming, initial requirements gathering, architecture. We then from that develop a set of epics or high-level user stories, and then these are then taken through. And as we talked about, the features or epics rather are sort of prioritised and taken into each iteration, and then basically we keep releasing every sprint. So where in the Agile life cycle would you integrate creativity? Well, the first and kind of most obvious place would be during the Sprint Zero envisioning stage. This is when you're shaping the business goals, when you are all trying to put together a common vision of the system, and when you're really trying to work out what those high-level requirements are, the epics. And the best time to do that is usually after you've done some model storming and architecture and some initial kind of scoping, when you've all got a shared understanding, that kind of baseline to start from. So I'm going to tell you about the first project that I applied the technique to, and tell you how that works. So this is for a corporate event system. I really designed the envisioning process. So beginning with research, so kind of your inspiration and a lot of your user-centered design approaches and techniques that you'd use. And this is really about understanding the scope and the project. And then from that, you then want to actually plan your workshop. So that's all about what are the goals of the workshop, having a challenge statement, choosing the appropriate creativity techniques, which can be quite interesting, identifying who your key stakeholders are, which is really important, and where possible getting a diversity of people. And then you've got practicalities like booking the venue and what materials you're going to have. The next thing obviously is to run the workshop. So run the workshop, and then afterwards, really important, kind of evaluate and refine any ideas that you have. And then from that, those will then make up the backlog, the requirements backlog. So the first technique, basically I designed a 3-hour workshop for this event system at BBC Worldwide. And the first technique that I used is from Luke Hoffman's book, which is Innovation Games, which is actually very agile, sort of got lots of agile kind of techniques and games in there. It's not highly, not all the games are highly creative, but they're actually, it's all sort of based on marketing research, marketing principles and agile techniques. But the one that really interested me actually was Remember the Future. So I ran this workshop, just this first bit for about 50 minutes, and in this got the stakeholders to imagine that the event that the system was being designed for had actually taken place. And we were now in July the 5th, 2012, and the team had to look back on the success of the system and imagine, so what made it a success? So hence remembering the future. And so from this they brainstormed lots of great ideas, and we got those up on the board. And on this board I had prepared beforehand a timeline of the events, and then we were to post the post-it notes or the idea at the appropriate point in time. And really the great thing about this technique was that it allowed people to think about the whole kind of before the event, during the event, and then afterwards, so kind of the bigger picture. The second technique is actually one designed by James Robertson, who I mentioned earlier, and this is called Creativity Triggers. And what happens here is you think about the system that you're designing from the angle of 7 different qualities or different perspectives, and those are information, convenience, connections, services, trust, green, and a 7th one. And really from that you kind of generate or think about the system from different angles, and actually it's a really good, it's very good for new projects, but also if you've got an existing system and there's something you want to improve. So we ran this technique, and then the third technique, the idea was to do combinational creativity and storyboarding. One of the senior stakeholders wasn't in the workshop for the first 2 hours, but turned up for the third and final hour. So being prepared for kind of expect the unexpected, I was ready to kind of change the workshop plan, and actually decided for the last hour it made more sense to actually have a group discussion and also involve the senior stakeholder and talk through the ideas that we've come up with so far, which worked really well. So from that we generated lots and lots of ideas from the 3-hour workshop. So I put those into an Excel spreadsheet just so that you can kind of sort and manage your data, but then actually it's not very creative, though I wanted to, when I started to present this to people, just put it into a colourful mind map just showing the main themes and the ideas. So the second place then, where you would integrate creativities into Agile, would be during the sprints, so during the iterations. But to actually do one every single sprint with every feature or epic rather would just be excessive, and there wouldn't be the time or budget to do it, and it'd be a lot of hard work, I imagine. So really you want to select 1 or 2 epics that have the greatest potential for creative thinking. So how are you going to do that? So through my research, did lots of research and came across some criteria by Isaacson in his Creative Approaches to Problem Solving, which I have to say is one of the best books you could ever want. It's got loads and loads of practical advice and tips and lots of different tools and techniques. It's a really good book, and in there is some criteria, and this is how I helped to identify which epics you would pick to have to run a creative workshop. So those are, which are the most ambiguous, which ones are kind of really vague and we're not very sure about, and actually there might be something quite interesting lying underneath that we want to explore. Which are perhaps the most complex that we need a better understanding of again. Ones that have a great need for novelty, or as I put it, have a competitive advantage. And finally, the ones that have the greatest creative potential. And let's face it, when you're about to run a workshop and if you're calling in your senior management or senior stakeholders, then you want to focus on the right sort of themes or epics, to make the most of your time with those people, and whilst you've got their domain knowledge and their input. So during this, I'll just go back. So this project is actually for a TV listings website, and so the team had already got together and already done a lot of market research and competitor analysis and group discussions, and they'd already got a backlog of requirements and epics together. So really we had all those ready and waiting, and now could come in with this second stage of the process to pick which epic has the greatest potential. And so we ran a short session with the project manager and the head of design, business analysts and developers, and kind of went through the criteria. And there was one that really stood out, and this was the idea of social networking and the idea of Facebook's liking something. So we were looking to integrate Facebook into the website, so the idea of liking something, which would be the most kind of obvious and perhaps simplest solution. But actually the team thought there's something else that we could be doing here, and we'd like to explore it further. So before the workshop, I met with the lead developer and just wanted to validate that the one that we'd chosen was the right one, and literally just to tick the boxes, got him to fill in, it's kind of got number 4, great need for novelty, it's complex, it's very ambiguous, and it's kind of open to creative thinking. So from that, and then during that session with the lead developer, I also wanted to just understand where he was coming from in terms of what he wanted from the creative workshop, and it's also just helped me understand where he was coming from with this idea of liking something. So then I designed a 1-hour workshop, and I decided to kind of marry together the idea of BBC characters and TV listings website and this Hall of Fame, and came up with the ideas of random stars. So what we did was I put together and cut out all these images of BBC characters and television programmes and put them in a bag, and then during the session we went round one by one, and each person pulled out a TV character, and then this sparked off new conversations and new avenues of thought for us to think about the website and about the experience. So during that kind of 50 minutes, an hour, we generated loads and loads of really good ideas, and I think one of the key reasons why it was a success is that we had really good kind of flow, so everyone was bouncing ideas off one another. There was lots of kind of energy in the room, and it was just myself facilitating, the head of design, a business analyst, a lead developer and a developer, so myself and 4 others. So we did kind of half-hour brainstorm, and then we did the random stars technique, and as I said, trying to keep it kind of fun and relevant. And then what was interesting in the ideas that we generated was that the ideas from the brainstorming session, people seemed to come up with ideas based on their domain knowledge. A lot of the ideas from the brainstorming were based on people's domain knowledge. And then the random stars technique seemed to make a more emotional connection. So from this, there was the idea of kind of emotional connection, fancying actors. So we thought about what if there's an actor that you really, really fancy, and suddenly they die, and you're really upset. But maybe the TV listings website could actually say, hey, don't worry, it's really sad they've died, but actually they're in this new drama starting on BBC 2 next week. And another idea was, there was Vicky Pollard. So if you if there was perhaps a programme that you had to watch, and all your school friends will be watching it, and if you don't watch this programme tonight, then actually when you go to school tomorrow, you're going to be a social leper. That's what we said. And finally, Alan Sugar sparked the idea of perhaps you could separate your TV to do with work life and your personal life. There are lots and lots of ideas that we generated. So then a week later, the business analyst and lead developer went to the product owner and talked him through the ideas, and there are two ideas that he was really keen on that we're hoping are going to get implemented. Going back to the sort of high-level goal of the project then, was the evaluation. So what I did was I wanted to compare the original backlog of epics with those ideas created in the creative workshop. And so this is going back to Maiden et al.'s work and how they have done similar kind of study. And so in this I took a random sample of 20 ideas from each, from both the backlog and the workshop, and it was quite a lengthy process to pull all the data together and get them into similar formats, same formats, and then basically designed a test, and I got 10 domain experts to then individually on a test paper actually rate the novelty and the usefulness of each idea, and obviously not knowing which had come from which group. And actually the results are very interesting. So I conducted a median test and unpaired t-test, and from that found that the average novelty was statistically significantly higher than that of the original backlog. Sorry, the Epic Workshop was higher than the original backlog. But there was a decrease in the average usefulness of those ideas, which I suppose isn't too much of a surprise, because if you're thinking about it, if you're forcing yourself to kind of think outside reason and those patterns of thought, then you're bound to come up with more ideas with less usefulness. But the key to remember is that it just takes that one killer idea in order to turn your product to something that's a greater user experience, or something that's going to be head and shoulders above your competitors. So to recap then, the key points. So Agile has great potential for innovation. It's geared for innovation, but I think it's lacking creativity that we need to explicitly integrate into the life cycle. And it is possible, as I've shown, to integrate creativity and creative thinking into Agile, even when you've got limited time, limited budget, limited resources. And as I said, you just need that one killer idea, and I just say go for it and give it a go. That's it. Thank you.